I'm delighted to be here today to present the work of the King's Foundation to you, representatives of the craft community in the Netherlands. I suspect that all of us in this room today share a passion for heritage craft skills and a vision for the future that builds communities, that acknowledges the needs of people, and which protects our historic environment against a backdrop of environmental concerns, or should I say, an environmental crisis. The King's Foundation is proud to have as its founder His Majesty King Charles III. Around 35 years ago, the then Prince of Wales founded a small architecture and heritage organisation based on the belief that by working with nature and respecting tradition, he could transform lives. His vision grew, and today we are an organisation that positively impacts the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in the UK alone. This quote from the COP28 summit sums up the spirit by which we are guided by still. Unless we rapidly repair and restore nature's unique economy based on harmony and balance, which is our ultimate sustainer, our economy and survivability will be imperiled. And I think you'll probably agree that those are sort of quite shocking words to hear from someone in such a position as the King. But we're very proud that he stood up and said it. His Majesty the King brought attention to these issues over 5 decades ago. I don't know whether you're aware, but certainly in the UK, in the early days, there was quite a lot of ridicule for some of the ideas that the then Prince Charles had. There were reports in the newspaper about maybe he was a bit crazy because he was talking to his plants in his greenhouse, talking about, you know, a crisis, impending doom. But, you know, we turn around now and we realise that he was right. And we take great pride in working with someone who had such a forward vision for the future. And so we're still inspired by that original vision and those values and the aim to build and support communities where people and places can coexist in harmony to benefit the planet. His Majesty's philosophy of harmony simply means that by understanding the balance, order, and relationships between ourselves and the natural world, we can create a more sustainable future. This understanding runs deep in nature, and it manifests itself in humankind in many spiritual beliefs and creative expressions. And it sounds like quite a simple statement, harmony, but when you actually drill deep, there is a deep philosophical idea that runs all the way through everything that the King proactively talks about and supports. Don't have time to go into the nuances of it now, but he has written a fantastic book all about it that explores harmony in its deepest sense. So during this presentation, I'll just focus on the 3 values, and then I'll tell you in more detail about one of our flagship initiatives, which is the Building Craft Programme. So how do we achieve our goals? We protect traditional knowledge and skills from cultures from across the globe, and we work to preserve historic community assets. We promote nature-led, harmonious living and working, and we put this into practice across our sites and across communities that we work with. Our approach respects the past and looks to traditional skills to build a future. We work with nature, not against it. And we lead by example, so people can see how change can work. For to see change is to believe that it is possible. Positive regeneration can create economic viability. And when led by local people who are invested in their communities and their environment, both man-made and natural. So we have, across the King's Foundation, we have 4 publicly accessible sites. And then we also have 2 further teaching schools in London, and some abroad as well, and countless outreach projects that we are involved with. Highgrove is the much-loved private residence of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, and since 2021, the King's Foundation has been the custodian of the gardens which surround the house. These gardens were groundbreaking at their time of design and inception, and the gardens today inspire and educate people, promoting an organic and sustainable approach to gardening. At Highgrove, we also have craft training workshops in furniture making, textiles, and building crafts. The Castle of May was the cherished home of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and here we have a bed and breakfast and wedding venue set in the beautiful Caithness countryside in the far north of Scotland. And we have ambitions to extend our education facility there as well. The Garrison Chapel is in London, and it is a beautiful Grade 2 listed chapel in Chelsea. And here we host exhibitions to promote the work of our students, as well as events and receptions which bring together people to share knowledge and experiences. And finally, I come to Dumfries House, which is the headquarters of the King's Foundation and is a model for heritage-led regeneration. It was saved for the nation by His Majesty, the then Prince Charles, in 2007. The house displays one of the largest collections of Chippendale furniture in the world, and in the grounds, the extensive training centre offers nature-led learning, nature-inspired learning, and traditional craft skills and STEM learning, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, all rooted in the principle of harmony, and that STEM teaching is aimed predominantly at primary school-aged children and at their teachers as well. Recent additions to the site include a health and wellbeing centre, which has benefited over 15,000 people since 2017, and a rural skills centre, which complements the activity of our teaching farm, which is a small kind of pocket farm where we have all sorts of animals and geese and pigs and sheep and things like that running around, which is lovely. And that supports the food and the farming initiative and some of the catering training that we do on site as well. So our programmes are aimed at a very wide range of people. Our local communities near Dumfries House and Highgrove and in London all benefit from access to open spaces, learning centres, short courses, and then we also support students from across the UK and actually from across the Commonwealth and Europe to train with us on specialist furniture, textiles and craft programmes. And these programmes are delivered as residential programmes, so the students actually come and live with us on site at Dumfries House or Highgrove. They eat, they cook, they learn together, and you know, it's a really immersive experience that they go through. And this all helps them to take them on the next step into becoming heritage craft professionals. So these are just a few images that represent some of the wonderful projects, events and moments on site, ranging from tea dances to winter warmers and lunches for local communities and charities, to volunteer gardening days, bespoke training, farming events. We also have a diploma year, like a foundation course in London as well, for post-18 learners before they go on to university courses. So yeah, it's quite a lively picture. An example of some of the inspirational programs which I'm particularly involved with at Highgrove are programs with some leading fashion houses who have embraced the need to preserve heritage skills such as embroidery, millinery and knitting. And by knitting I mean some of the niche kind of knitting techniques that might be found in sort of communities, particularly in the far north of Scotland actually, which are in danger of being lost because they are so beautiful and so precise. We also work in partnership with other organisations to promote the use of British wool. You could argue that our British culture and identity and wealth was built on British wool, but now it actually costs the farmers more to shear their flock of sheep than they do from the price of the wool. They just can't sell it, which is ridiculous. So that's one of the key things that we really want to try and change, is bringing wool back into the economy and making it a viable material. But with our partnerships with industry, we've designed and delivered programs which train graduates and early career makers to the highest of standards, and all with sustainability in mind. So, for example, our furniture program at Highgrove works exclusively and creatively with British Timber, and in very close collaboration with industry. So not all of the courses that we deliver are accredited, so that students don't necessarily get a certificate at the end of their courses. But by working very, very closely with industry, we are able to train people in the skills that industry needs. And particularly with the British furniture industry, you know, there's actually, you know, people want to buy beautiful furniture from makers using British timber, but we just don't have the people skilled to go into the workshops, because they leave colleges and universities with great design skills, but not the making skills. So our furniture program at Highgrove, again, it's an immersive experience. It puts the students in front of machinery, in front of hand tools, and gets them working, which is, it's brilliant. They come out with so much more confidence. So last year, over 15,000 students attended programs and left armed with knowledge, skills, and passion to work towards a positive future. In addition to this, our international programs have trained and supported over 5,000 students in traditional arts at teaching centres in Azerbaijan, in Egypt, China, and Saudi Arabia. And that's using exactly the same model, by training people in the skills that are local to their communities, and giving them an opportunity to work to a really high standard and then be able to sell their work. And what's really positive about those particular programs is the amount of women that we are able to bring in and train. It's absolutely fantastic. So as well as our craft and heritage skills programs, we also focus on food and farming and the built environment. So we develop planning toolkits to help communities across the globe deal with rapid urbanisation, climate change mitigation, and resilience. We have 15 live placemaking projects across the globe which support decision-making, planning, and good practice in the design of new communities and in the conservation of heritage assets. Our Journal of Urbanism has been in publication for 17 years, and in 2020, 2,000 participants from 88 countries convened and adopted the Declaration on Sustainable Urbanism. So through these programs, large and small, all underpinned by this guiding principle of harmony, we are able to demonstrate to others how change can be supported and inspire others to plan for a more sustainable future for people and the planet. So now I'd just like to spend a bit of time talking about the program that I am most closest to, and which I hope you share an affinity with, which is the Build and Craft program. So the Build and Craft program is now in its 15th year, and throughout that time it has had one simple goal: to train the next generation of craft professionals to be able to restore and conserve our historic environment. And now more than ever, under the pressure of net zero targets, planners and budget holders are realising that keeping old buildings in use rather than mothballing or demolishing them is one of the keys to meeting environmental targets and creating communities that people want to live in. And the skills that we are promoting are vital if we are able to achieve this. So the programme is divided into 4 key phases, which are designed to help the students to progress confidently and to gain an NVQ, a national vocational qualification, at the end. So with this particular course, it is accredited. They do get a certificate, because particularly in the construction sector, a certificate means that you can then go on to get what's called a CSCS card, which means that you can legally work on construction sites. You've passed your health and safety and all of those kind of key concerns. So it gives employers a measure of surety that the person they are employing is sensible, basically. The building craft students who come onto this program all have existing skills, so it is not an entry-level program. So they will already either be in working as plasterers, or roofers, or bricklayers, or stonemasons, for example. But after a few years, perhaps out there in the trade, they suddenly have a little bit of an epiphany, or they have an experience working on a historic building site, and they suddenly go, aha, this is what I want to do. I enjoy working with old buildings. I enjoy the vibe of a conservation project. And so they look for training. And probably very similarly as here, that training can be really difficult to find. It's either expensive, or it's in a different part of the UK that they can't take time off to attend. And so hopefully the ones that stay enthused eventually find us and decide to apply for our course, and then make that important step from sort of the normal construction sector into working in the heritage construction sector. And we receive applications from people of all ages, from their 20s to their 30s, 40s, 50s. It doesn't matter. We welcome applications from anyone who is willing and passionate enough to make that transition. So the program starts off with a summer school. And this gathers the students together, not just from the Building Craft program, but they're also joined from other students, perhaps from across the Commonwealth, or other European students. They convene at Dumfries House to undertake 3 weeks of very intensive study, and it is very intensive study every day, pretty much, for 3 weeks. They have tours, they have lectures, training in key craft areas such as stonemasonry, timber framing, roofing, stained glass, but they don't do that additional training in their specialism. They actually choose a different specialism to do this short training in, because we believe that in order to work collaboratively and productively on a conservation heritage project, you actually need to understand what each other is doing, because all of these concerns intersect in one way or another. You all have to rely on each other. You all have to understand where you are in the bigger picture of a conservation project. The building craft students then stay on, and they participate in a design week, which is an opportunity to put what they have understood to the test and work as a team to design a building using their traditional skills knowledge, which they will then build later on during the program. So the industry placements are the core of the program. They spend 16 weeks, sometimes more, out in the field, working in their chosen craft skill, with the aim of advancing their skills on site on real projects with real teams of craft professionals. And this can be really challenging for our students, because they are literally thrown in at the deep end. They're living away from home, having to find accommodation, sometimes moving quite quickly from project to project, depending on kind of the experiences that they're looking for, and the opportunities that we're able to give them. And so they have to learn to work quickly, but also to produce skillful work. And we support the students at this point with a bursary, and that's really important. So they actually get funding which covers their accommodation and living costs. Because for most people who want to upskill, who want to spend time retraining, they're at a stage in their lives where they can't just take the time off work. They do need to be supported in order to be able to do that properly. So the bursary is really, really important. And we're always available on the end of the phone to help them with any issues should they need it. We're really, really lucky to have a network of trusted placement providers. So people out there in the industry, in the field, who are willing to take our students on. and give them this absolutely fantastic opportunity. And then quite often, once the students have finished the program with us, they go back to those people that they've met during their placements, and they actually start working for them. So it's a brilliant job interview, basically, that they're being sent out on. And then when they come back from their placements, usually after Christmas, they begin the live build. And this is the highlight of the program, when the students work together to realize the building that they designed all those weeks earlier. So by this point, we will have consolidated their design. It will have gone to planning permission, so we do everything properly. So we have to get the building design through planning permission. We have to, involve the students in the planning of what happens next, of how they're going to manage the build. And then they have not very long, but just a few short weeks to build a building. And over the years, these buildings have been at different scales, different materials, styles, and finishes, depending on the location, use, skill set of the cohort that is available, and of course, budget. So they do have to budget this project as well. But they are all, regardless of how and when they were built, they are all wonderful examples of architecture that showcase traditional craft skills and the personality of each cohort of students. Quite a few of these buildings are at Dumfries House. Not all of them, some are scattered across the country as well. But wherever they are, they add truly magic moments to gardens and landscapes, wherever they feature. And very happy students, and tired students at the end of it. And then, very importantly, somewhere in amongst all of that happening, we tackle the really nitty-gritty, because it's not just about the romantic ideals of becoming a craftsman and working with your tools, but the students also need to understand what it takes to either run a small business or to survive as a sole trader. And so they have a very intense business skills week as well. So we introduce them to lots of different professionals who teach them how to balance their books, how to manage the design process, how to cost out a project. We also have a session with an ex-policeman who used to be a diplomat. He used to manage hostage situations, basically, so quite terrifying experiences. But he talks to them about how to manage difficult situations. Hopefully it never gets to the point where, but he's very good. But that's really, really crucial to helping these young professionals get out there in the field and really manage what they're doing well. And we're really proud. We're really, really proud of the impact of the program. The vast majority of students who graduate continue to work in the field of building conservation, or they may apply their skills to eco-build, for example. If you think about timber framing, there's a nice crossover there between a lot of timber frame buildings in the UK and a real drive and interest towards new eco-builds that use UK timber and things like lime plastering and things like that, all sort of carbon neutral buildings. So it's wonderful to see some of the students kind of veering off slightly into that course as well. But some of the students also progress after a few years into project management level. And then they are quite nicely in a position to be able to offer the next cohort of students a placement. So this circular approach of training, learning, teaching is a really powerful model. So they learn with us, then they go out and get jobs, and then they can come back as teachers. It happens all the time, and it's wonderful to bring our students back to teach the next cohort. They have such a passion for what they do. So we may never be able to return to the days of medieval masters and apprentices, but in some ways that's kind of what we want to try and replicate by creating this circular kind of learning system. And just in terms of, obviously we do what we do as the King's Foundation, and we're really, really lucky that we have fantastic people who fund our programs, fantastic partnerships with industry. But there are also lots of other organizations who are doing very similar things to us. One of the things that we're proud of is that our program, the Building Crafts program, has had 15 years and will continue. Some other agencies and organizations just offer shorter opportunities, perhaps linked to shorter pots of funding. But nevertheless, it's really important that we can collaborate together to offer the training programs needed for students. The sector is under huge pressure at the moment, and funding constraints aside, there's simply not enough people with the skills to undertake the work that is needed to look after our traditional buildings. In the UK, we define a traditional building as ones that were built before 1919. So that's kind of our cut-off point, effectively, the First World War, when we lost so many skills, and then suddenly all these new materials that sort of ended up on shelves that were easily accessible by people. But what we're also seeing now is increasingly post-1919 buildings are being listed and are being protected as heritage assets. So they're falling under that same umbrella. So, there is some need now to actually train students to look at the conservation of brutalist concrete buildings or postmodern buildings. So that's almost like an extra shift, an extra pressure on the conservation sector. However, the work of the King's Foundation pretty much still focuses on those traditional buildings, such as country houses, medieval ruins, parish churches, terraced houses, things like that. But some of the other organisations that we're lucky to work with are things like the National Trust and English Heritage, and there are lots of other smaller charities who are either owners and custodians of nationally important buildings and landscapes, and so we work with them whenever we can. Historic England, Historic Environment Scotland and CADU are the public bodies, so they are responsible for listing buildings, for undertaking research, supporting planning consents, and offering advice to homeowners. But sadly, they are less and less able to offer funding to projects. And now one of the main sources of funding for some of the bigger, more public-facing projects is the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So that all comes from the National Lottery. So the money that comes in from the National Lottery is divided into lots of different pools, so whether that's sport or heritage or arts, and then that gets fed out by those individual organisations to worthy projects. But also of interest, which I thought I would mention, is the Heritage Crafts Alliance, which is that one there. So they publish something called the Red List, which is a really insightful and increasingly urgent call to protect crafts which are at risk of becoming extinct. And this Red List of endangered crafts is published biennially, and since 2017 has captured the interest of the nation. They use a very clever traffic light system, red for critically endangered, amber for kind of okay, just about jogging along, and then green for viable. So that's their definition of different crafts. And each time they publish the list, you find crafts that sort of move from being critically endangered, perhaps into the just about okay category. And it captures, and some crafts just disappear. They just disappear off the list. So rather shockingly, there's nobody in the UK anymore who makes cricket balls, which is a bit of a loss for a nation that loves cricket, even though we might not be very good at it. But that's just an example of no one knew, no one was aware. Everyone just thought, well, cricket balls will always be made in England, but all of a sudden we realised that they weren't. And so this kind of intriguing publication highlights some very, very little known crafts. And actually, opens out that discussion about, well, should they be saved? What does viability mean? If there isn't a market for a craft, what do you do with that? What do you do with someone who or clay pipes? You know, no one smokes clay, no one uses clay pipes to smoke with anymore. So should we be saving that craft or not? Are we just being romantic about it? So it opens up all of these discussions when you see it in black and white like that. I think a few other countries have started to adopt this system as well, a way of collating all of their traditional crafts and kind of assessing. So the next list will be published in 2025. And since we have finally on the road to signing the UNESCO Convention to safeguard intangible heritage, this will have an impact on this list because it changes the conversation about what a craft is. And I think that's really important. And that comes down to the way we recognize places and spaces that need funding as well. If we can actually talk about the intangible heritage of a community space rather than just the architectural heritage, the visible heritage, then that suddenly brings that place to life in a way that perhaps it didn't before, and perhaps I hope now, places will have more of an opportunity and communities will have more of an opportunity to access funding because what they're talking about is recognised, finally. But we have, as a sector, we have been way ahead of the government for years. And we've been pushing for the signing of this treaty for a long, long time. So it's a huge relief that that's now finally in process. So I need to wrap up now. But yeah, it's a changing field. And that makes it difficult and exciting at the same time. And the great thing about the King's Foundation as an organisation is that we can be quite light on our feet. So we can make decisions, we can respond to individual people who come to us with a project or an idea or something like that. And we're really, really proud of that. And we will continue to do that because we believe passionately in what we do and that central mission of people, places, planet. Thank you.